Welcome to the I'm Healing podcast, where we share healing stories, self-inquiry, and solutions for the soul. I'm your host and healer, Iris L. Mendez of ILM Healing Solutions. And I'm here to share a little bit of my healing story. It's been about a year since we have had a podcast episode, and I just want to shout out to everybody who continues to share the podcast, like the podcast, slide in my DMs or send me an email about a podcast. The podcast officially turns 4 years old. You guys know this was a COVID creation. Officially sometime, March, literally around this time 4 years ago. Where I decided that my voice was needed. I think I was taking a social media detox at the time, and I realized my voice was needed as the world was shutting down. So there I was trying to figure out how to create a podcast in my closet, literally at like 3 a.m. So that is the birth story of the I'm Healing podcast. And so here we are now 4 years later. It's been about a year since I've had an episode. And I've just been taking time to refocus and really put my energy in other areas of creativity, other areas to support my own healing from the root chakra to the crown chakra, ensuring that I have a stable foundation so that I can continue to create, because as we all know, our center of creation is in our sacral chakra. Well, maybe we don't all know that, but and that also begins, at the bottom layer, the foundation of the root chakra, making sure that all is stable in order to create the space for creativity, or to have the space for creativity. So here I am. Before we get started on today, I'm going to touch on a few different healing topics today and healing solutions. I did just want you to just check in with yourself, right? Whether you're listening to this while you're driving, obviously be super careful, but just take a moment to pause here and just breathe. Just notice your natural, normal breath, the rise and fall of your belly and your chest, setting the intention to receive this information, this knowledge and wisdom, right? If you're here for a reason. I don't believe in coincidences, so take what resonates. Allow yourself to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Allow yourself to check in. Just check in with your 4 bodies. How are you feeling physically in the vessel? How are you feeling mentally? Thoughts, patterns. How are you feeling emotionally? A feeling word. And like I always tell my clients, I feel some type of way is not a feeling. So go ahead and identify that emotion, validate it, and if you gotta let it go, let it go. And just scan your spiritual body, your energy, your aura, your connection to Source, higher power. How do you feel in that body? Allow yourself to just scan the 4 bodies, scanning your environment, scanning your 5 senses, and taking a few deep breaths on your own, letting go of anything that does not serve you in this moment. And coming back to the body, wiggling the toes and the fingertips if you can. And I hope that this helps to settle. You can always come back to this. Settle the body, settle the mind. You can always come back to this little brief mindfulness activity. This is how I work with clients. So if you're interested in working more one-on-one with me, definitely send me an email, or you can head to my website, www.ilmhealingsolutions.com. I do have a limited availability on service offerings. And Yoga Nidra is a part of that, which is a guided meditation similar to what we just did. And so I am excited for today's episode. Here we are a year later, and a lot has happened within a year. I'm gonna try not to talk too much about myself specifically, but I do want to share just a part of my journey. I think the biggest thing for me over the past year was the topic of healing through grief. Grief comes in many forms, and I talk about it in my book, Healing My Four Bodies, where I have experienced grief in the past. I had a cousin who was murdered my sophomore year of high school. And I think that for me was always like the biggest form of grief. And up until last year, I had to navigate grief from a different lens, this time with the loss of my uncle and the loss of my grandmother, all within, months apart. And the journey through that, I would say I'm still working through. I don't, and I say this in my book, like, I don't think that grief is something that's you can fully heal, so to speak. I believe that when it comes to grief, especially depending on who the person was and what the loss is, how great of an impact it was, I believe that it can literally change a person. I really want to know studies on how it even impacts like DNA, chemical makeup, because I feel like for close relationships, especially for relatives, like I can see it in people who I've witnessed lose something, or someone rather, and I can see it within my own experience, where it almost feels like a part of you also has gone with the person that is no longer with us on this plane of existence. And I really struggled with, I would say, both my uncle's loss, the loss of my uncle, and my grandmother's loss. Each of them impacted me very differently. However, the grief was grave for both, and they both were very different processes. And because I experienced wasn't what most in psychology they would identify it as compounded grief, when there is a significant amount of grief kind of compounded into a short amount of time. For me, I got to fully experience it for myself. And it's interesting because as a former psychotherapist, I used to support people in spaces when it comes to helping them heal from their own grief. And so I've helped people through the loss of, a pet, the loss of a significant other, the loss of a relative. I've supported people struggle through grief through the loss that maybe the person is still alive and they moved out of the country, or they just don't have no more communication with that person. That's also grief. And I've personally experienced the feeling of grief in a previous relationship where I played a role that I had to then grieve once that relationship ended. And so there's different forms of grief, and everyone deals with it very differently. And each loss can be impactful. And what I've also noticed is that each loss can essentially, like if you go through one loss and then it's been years since that loss occurred, and then you go through another loss, it's almost like that Band-Aid kind of re-ripping itself all over again. That wound opens back up. And so that is an interesting thing when it comes to grief that I have personally noticed, that not just within my own experience, but also with the experience of helping others navigate through grief. Now it's just that it's a little bit more impactful, so now I can literally sit there and look at past clients and like, okay, I get it. And that's the thing. An outsider looking in might not understand your grief. I lost my uncle, my mom lost her brother. So that impacted her very differently than how it impacted me. And I'm not saying that one is, grander than the other, but I say that to say you really got to put that into perspective when you personally lose someone or someone you love has lost someone. You have to give them the space and time that they specifically I don't even want to say need, but like you just got to give people their space. You got to give people their time to go through what they got to go through, the journey through the healing process of grief, because it does look very differently for everyone. And I often refer back to like the stages of grief because that's where my clinical hat goes from all the years of education, bachelor's in psychology, master's in social work, and learning about the stages of grief. And they always taught us the stages of grief, but I'm not too much of a fan of those stages of grief because I feel like for everyone it's different. And I also feel like those specific stages of grief, for those of you who don't know, it's like 5 stages. There's anger, bargaining, off the top of my head here, acceptance, I can't think of the other 2 right now, but basically these stages of grief will you go through each of them is what they're trying to say as far as contextualizing it in a clinical aspect. But you may find that you're not going through them. It's not like just stages that you go through and, oh, I'm in the first stage, up, now I'm in the 3rd stage, up, now I'm in the 5th stage, okay, I'm done grieving. Does not happen that way. It does not happen that way. And the grief feeling can occur even when a person is still alive. That can happen through a breakup. You can go through the stages of grief in a breakup, but I want to highlight today, as it pertains to the stages of grief. And even now, when I was in school, it was the 5 stages of grief. Now they have the 6 stages of grief and the 7 stages of grief. And, they're it's not cookie cutter is what I'm trying to say. When it comes to grief, it is not cookie cutter. Yes, you may find yourself in these stages of denial, right? That's another one. Depression, bargaining, anger, acceptance. You might go through these. You might go through these all in one day. You might realize in one moment you're in acceptance and then something happens, you get triggered externally by maybe a memory, a song that reminds you of the person, and then maybe now you're angry. Maybe now you're angry. I've often heard of people also being angry with source when it comes to loved ones who have been taken too soon, so to speak, where it's like, why? Now you're angry. And so we've got to try to transmute those feelings. And I went through some of those emotions with the loss of my uncle specifically, as well as my grandmother, coming to terms with it. While I was more prepared for my grandmother's than I was for my uncle's passing, even when my grandmother passed, no one could ever prepare enough, and so for individuals who might be listening to this and maybe have relatives who are on hospice, right? That's sort of a preparation, a bereavement, right? Preparation of bereavement. And what occurs there is that you might think that you're prepared, but once the actual passing occurs, you're never really going to be fully prepared. And so those are, I guess, would be my lessons of grief or navigating grief, is that those stages, they're not always cookie cutter, and you don't always go through them in a linear form. There's also no like ending to it. I feel like grief really impacts people long term, like for a lifetime. And the other piece is that everyone navigates it differently. And the biggest thing that I learned about it all too, especially coming from a Hispanic mostly Hispanic background where my family identifies with certain religious systems, Catholicism, specifically speaking here, and the honoring of dates of death and the prayers that have to happen on the date of death within the first year of the passing, like those kinds of rituals or practices. I recognize that, people have to honor their way of paying homage to their loved ones on the other side. And while that's how my family, may honor the passings, right? That might be their practices. It's okay for my specific practices and the way that I honor or pay homage or my belief systems. It's okay for mine to be different. And what I've learned for me is that I prefer rather to honor ancient belief systems, that energy life after death continues, and that our energy continues in some way, shape, or form in the ethers on the other side. And I find peace in knowing that my relatives are always with me, always with me. I mean, I've even have bizarre stories within the past year, really right after my grandmother passed, end of September. My grandmother passed in September, so within 2 months I was running into like psychic mediums, and they're like, I got a message for you. And there's no way that anyone could not tell me that was from my grandmom, the message that I received, because that psychic medium, who literally saw me in the random middle of the street, one day stopped me and had this message for me. And there, she knew nothing about me, nothing about my grandmom, and the things that she was saying, the personality she was describing, of the message she was receiving, it was definitely my grandmom. It's definitely for me. And so that's how I honor my relatives, is knowing that I find peace in knowing that their energy is still with us. Like, they're always going to be with you from an energetic standpoint and looking out for you. So anybody going through grief, my heart goes with you. I send you lots of healing, healing energy. I definitely recommend going into therapy. I've actually been looking into it for myself as well, to process that specifically. But overall, the theme here today that I want to harp on as we move into the spring equinox, right? The real season of the newness, or, the real new year, as they say. Everything starts to renew and grow. Grow through your healing, grow through what you go through. And that's my takeaway from the past year for me, is to come out, a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser, also being able to make better decisions as it relates to how you cope with certain things. And so for me specifically, how I'm coping, spring equinox, I love to pay homage to Pachamama, Mother Earth. And so I am grateful to be going to a retreat with the wonderful At the Biz Bruja on sacred lands, where I'm also going to be able to connect with women, like-minded women, do some soul work and healing, while at the same time being able to offer some of my gifts, as I will be leading yoga. And so that for me is going to be a very pivotal point in my healing journey, because I have been to this specific retreat center. I think this is my 4th year going now, and I've done a lot of healing work each year. Each time I go, there is something new. I actually remember one of the first times I was there was a barber who was there. Shout out to Alina. And I was like, I just want to chop it off. And she literally went out to her car, dragged her little kit that she had. She grabbed her barber kit, dragged it in, or rolled it in, and chopped my hair off. And I am a firm believer that when you chop your hair off, what's the quote? Oh, when a woman cuts her hair, like she's changing her life or something like that. I think it's like a Coco Chanel quote. For me, cutting my hair has always been like an energetic release. So as I'm getting my hair cut, I am energetically releasing all the stagnant energy, all the energies that maybe I was around that didn't serve me well, all the things that maybe I want to let go of, they are released with my hair getting cut or chopped off. And now I find myself in the season of growth and renewal where I'm trying to grow my hair back out. Well, not trying, I am. And I'm growing my nails and, just this natural way of being really to me is synchronized with Mother Earth kind of renewing herself also. You'll soon see, especially on the East Coast, the trees and the flowers and everything blooming. And I feel like right now I'm in a blooming, growing state. So, it's maybe frost season right now, but, holla at me in a few months. I'm going to be even more evolved in my healing and growing through what I go through. And so that's a little bit of me kind of embarking on another journey of healing where now I'm accepting the growth through it all. And I'm going to try to refrain from just chopping it off because your girl loves her little pixie cut. But for now, we'll see. We'll see how tall I can grow. That's the best way I can, the best metaphors to describe it there. So I'm just excited with full of gratitude, and I'll try to keep this episode short. I'll try to come back soon for another episode. But for those of you who don't know, your girl has been creating. You already know you can find my book, Healing My Four Bodies, an interactive guide to self-inquiry and solutions for the soul, on Amazon. Thank you so much to everyone who has supported. It has about, I want to say, over 30 5-star reviews at this point. So if you're really looking to heal through your journey, start your own self-healing practice, this book is going to be super helpful. I want to shout out Hike and Heal in Philadelphia, where I was featured for their Hike and Heal book club in this past January. And it was amazing. It was amazing. So if you're listening to this and you have a group, or maybe a women's group or a book club, and you're interested in maybe having me host a 4-week Healing My Four Bodies book club, where each week we focus on one of the chapters in the book related to healing physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, holla at your girl, okay? Again, I have limited availability, but I am open for speaking discussions as well. And yeah, you could grab that on Amazon. I also have 2 journals that I have created. The Self-Love Journal, 35 Prompts to Embracing Self-Love. You actually get more than 35 prompts in the book. So I talk a little bit about my healing, more so my self-love journey in this book. And I give you about 36 self-inquiry or self-love journal prompts that you can write, and that you have ample space in this specific journal to journal whatever your heart desires, whatever is going to bring you closer to loving all up on you, right? Because the greatest romance that we have is the one that we have with ourselves, right? And so this self-love journal, 35 Prompts to Embracing Self-Love, can also be found on Amazon. And I have a moon journal now. So this is my most recent project, the Moon Journal, working with the lunar laws to illuminate your path. I may come back on here and do a podcast episode just on moon journaling. I started my moon journaling back in 2020, and it has completely changed my life. I specifically work with the new and the full moon, and so in this journal you have ample space to journal. You also have guidance from me on how to work with the new and the full moon, and I created the 10 lunar laws, which is essentially information and to-dos or ways to connect with the moon as you moon journal, things that can help your moon journaling practice or ritual that I've learned along the way, or even some quote unquote woo woo rules related to the moon. The 10 lunar laws is what I call them, and you can learn more about them in the journal. Again, this journal has ample space for writing, and you can find that as well on Amazon. And I'm, again, open for speaking engagements if you're interested in having me host something related to the journals as well. And I think that's really about it. Head over to Instagram. It's really going to be the best way to stay up to date. Join my email list. I'm having a book giveaway right now on Instagram for women in honor of Women's Month. And I do want to plug my mentor, Vanessa Coronu, and her podcast, her new podcast, Nacimos Mágico. Go ahead and check that out. Download it on all of your podcast streaming apps. And I believe that is all for now. You know where you can find me. Instagram at ILM Healing, TikTok for as long as you can, pending whatever happens over in Washington with TikTok, but at ILM_healing. And as always, happy healing.